Hello, everyone. I'm Zeus Kerravala, Principal Analyst with ZK Research, and I'm thrilled to be here today as we take a look at some of the most efficient, reliable ways to empower a mobile-first workplace. Mobile is obviously the way. We've gone through a lot of changes in the workforce. My research shows that, in fact, 75% of the workforce will be remote at least one day a week, and that's going to create a big spike in mobile working. Now, we know this is top of mind for most businesses, and today we're going to dig into how Verizon's calling solutions for Microsoft Teams can help deliver on that need with better confidence and assurity. So this is a great topic. I just met with a Teams executive this week, and we were talking about the phenomenal adoption of it. It's past 340 million users, and I believe and has proven to be an excellent collaboration tool with one exception, and that's calling. And in that case, there's a number of ways to add calling, and Verizon offers several options, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So I'm pleased to welcome two special guests for discussion. First, I'd like to welcome Derek Peabody, Director of Product Management of Mobile Unified Communications for Verizon's Business Group. Derek, would you please give us a little bio on yourself?
Hey, sure thing, Zeus, and thank you for having me join you here. I've been in this business for a little over 25 years, most of it in the voice space. I work out of our Boston Innovation Center, which you can see part of behind me. And it's been really exciting to watch the evolution of voice over those years, from copper to PRI to VoIP to cloud-based, and now to the next thing, as you've alluded to, mobile UC.
You know, it's funny that, Derek, that I always read about how voice is dying, right? Voice is going away, voice is dead, things like that. But voice has never been healthier. It just seems like voice continues to roll on and not only be strong, but actually grow.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And our other guest is Christine Temple-Wolf, Special Projects Manager for Maricopa Judicial Branch Court Technology Services. Christine, a bit of a bio on yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks for letting me join you today. So I work for the Maricopa Judicial Branch, and we are made up of all the court systems, so justice, superior, family, criminal, etc. We have about 3,500 employees. My particular department is about 140 employees. So we handle things from system administration, technology support, all of your assets and peripherals. We also do information security, and we do a service desk. So I've been there about 2.5 years, and we've been working on Teams for the last 6 months.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say in that environment, voice is mission critical for you still, right? This whole notion that voice is going away, certainly in a court system, you wouldn't expect to see that. So,
Yes.
Yeah. So, anyways, thanks both of you for joining me and take a look at what Verizon does for Microsoft Teams. And I think we're going to start first, just get a baseline from you, Derek. There's a lot of different ways you can provision voice with Microsoft Teams. And let's talk about the why of the solutions themselves. How and why does Verizon offer calling product for Teams, and why did you build what you built?
Absolutely. So first of all, just to level set everybody, when we say calling for Teams, we're really talking about the ability to call outside of the Teams environment. So, call down the street, order pizza, get incoming calls from people that maybe are not on Teams. And with that, Verizon has 3 different ways that we've enabled calling for Teams, and they were really done depending on what the customer's scenario is. So I'm going to go through those without making too much acronym soup for you guys. But the first one is Verizon calling for Microsoft Teams. That is what Microsoft refers to as direct routing. That's a globally available offer. It's more IP trunking or SIP trunking based. The next one is Verizon VoIP for Microsoft Teams, also an IP trunking one. Microsoft refers to that as Operator Connect, just to keep everything lined up. Very similar in some ways to the direct routing solution, with some important nuances that we'll get into in a little bit. And then lastly, what we're here to lead with is Verizon Mobile for Microsoft Teams. And again, Microsoft calls that Teams Phone Mobile, but that is where we have integrated Verizon's wireless infrastructure into Teams, which literally makes the smartphone now a native Teams endpoint. And it's driving a lot of excitement that we'll get into as we go through this conversation.
Yeah, one of the things I like about that, though, is to give customers different options, right? There isn't just everybody's got different needs, and so what's that expression that if the only tool in your toolkit's a hammer, everything looks like a nail? But I think customers do want options because they're all coming from different places. And with that being said, Christine, let's turn to you for your story. What were those specific challenges that you were facing, and what were some of the things you're trying to solve for?
Well, the precursors to us investigating this opportunity were COVID, of course. We have 80% of our workforce working remotely. We've been slow to come back, so a great number of our people are still working remote. But we also had the adoption of the G5 Microsoft license. So those two precursors encouraged us to do a telephony audit. So we did a detailed audit as a beta within our department of 140 folks. We learned that we could have an enormous savings by removing our ISDN lines and also providing greater connectivity for our remote workforce. Our team is a service organization. We need to be available 24/7. Our courts are open 7 days a week. So it's vital that we identify the job functions within the court and then aligned the Verizon Microsoft tools that would best support those positions.
So in essence, you were looking to do more and spend less.
Yes.
And
yes.
that kind of countered IT, where we can always do more but spend more. So we always talk about doing more with less. And so it's interesting that you actually set out with that goal in mind. So
Yeah.
Derek, I'm going to come back to you. You touched on the 3 different Verizon offerings. Can you do a little bit of a drill down on that and talk about the differences and what each solution is and how they address different needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So Verizon's calling for Microsoft Teams or direct routing is really the most customizable solution that we have. Each one of those deployments, Zeus and Christine, use a dedicated session border controller or SBC per customer, and that provides a lot of flexibility in what other services like call center, recording, all sorts of other things that you can integrate into the overall solution. That complexity, that flexibility does bring a little bit of complexity. So there's usually some professional services that come along with planning that, designing it, and implementing it, and often managing it after the fact. As I mentioned before, that's our broadest coverage. It is in 110 or greater countries today, and it uses our IP trunking or wireline services. So it's really designed for people that are a little bit more fixed in nature from their job perspective. And then the next thing is really the Verizon VoIP for Microsoft Teams. It is also a SIP trunking based service with Verizon, but it uses a lot more automation, and it uses carrier level SBCs or session border controllers. And that takes some of the complexity out of it, makes it a little bit easier, faster to implement. Still a great solution for somebody who's a little bit more fixed in nature that maybe comes to the office most of the time. And then finally is the mobile offer, Verizon Mobile for Microsoft Teams. As I mentioned before, that is completely integrated into our wireless network. We've built that over to Microsoft Teams. And for anybody that's hybrid or mobile, it finally gives them that ability to use their smartphone natively like they always do, but still have all of the Teams functionality extended out to that smartphone. I like to say it, I'll probably say it again in this discussion. It really allows, as you've alluded to, Zeus, and as Christine has said, meet the end user where and how they work, right? So every customer I've spoken to used at least 2 of these components, right? Nobody's all mobile, nobody's all fixed anymore. So again, that ability to meet people where and how they work, I think, is really important and what distinguishes those 3 products.
Yeah, I think the important thing of what you said there was that customers using multiple offers. And I think when you look at the different offerings, you could perceive them to be competitive where you use one or the other, but in fact, you can use a combination of those. And so, Christine, with that being said, I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to ask you, how did you decide to leverage the different Verizon offerings based on the rules of your team, and then come up with the solution that works for everyone?
Right. Well, what I did is we defined the user needs based on their job roles. So we have a number of folks that just need to talk to people within our branch, which is already included in our G5 license. So that's just our teams pulling up through our Active Directory and then calling those folks. That's the largest percentage of our particular workforce within my department. And then we identified a second user base that needs to call outside, but they do not want a cell phone. So we need to get those folks a number that's a business line, and they need to be able to work with vendors and partners that are not within our branch. And then we had another user group that, hey, we need to have cell phones, and we would like to have that integrated with our teams. So we basically met with the management team. We explained the different options that they could pursue. We made our recommendations based on our consult with Verizon and Microsoft, who have been great partners. And then we picked the best solution. We've deployed those solutions from a user-based perspective already. So we are actively in use of those products and that offering. And then we will go back and do some financial analysis and show the cost savings. And also we will survey those folks to find out usability and what their personal experience has been. Right now, we're currently looking at the service desk. So we're looking at a solution for the service desk with direct routing. So that's our phase 2.
Yeah, I think you just described the problem we just talked about. Is like you've got some people that want mobile phones and other people that want fixed phones, and some people want both. And so I think it's easy from a media perspective sometimes to just categorically say that everything is going mobile or whatever. But that's just in this world that we live in, people want to work the way they want to work. And Derek, I think that was your point about meeting the customer where they are. So, so I'm going to come back to you on that note. And tell me about some of the benefits your customers are seeing. Obviously, there's letting the customers work the way they want, but what are some of the other the business benefits that you see customers gaining here with your solutions?
I look at this in 3 main categories, and I'm going to kind of parrot Christine in some of these, right? Which shouldn't be surprising. The first one is really cost savings, and you heard that from Christine. That cost savings can come in a couple of different forms. With Verizon Mobile for Microsoft Teams, our mobile offer, if somebody really is a smartphone-based persona, the rest of the world knows them by their smartphone phone number, you can really start eliminating redundant or duplicative phone services, right? You may still be paying for a PBX seat for that mobile worker or some other phone service, and candidly, they probably don't want or use it. It may just be forwarded to their mobile device. So it's that whole elimination of that complexity and that cost. But even with our IP trunking-based services, Verizon Calling for Microsoft Teams and Verizon VoIP, it is allowing customers to move away from higher-priced prem-based PBX solutions into the Microsoft Teams solution and reduce their costs overall. So cost savings definitely a big driver from what I've heard. The second one is very specific to VMMT or Teams Phone Mobile, and that is really call quality on a smartphone when you're mobile. Traditionally, the only way that you could really do UC calling on a smartphone was using an app. Nothing wrong with apps. I've got apps in my portfolio, but the challenge with apps are that they run on the data portion of a mobile operator's network, whereas native voice is on its own QoS-enabled, VoLTE-enabled, high-quality portion of the network. It just simply gets more priority. And with the Teams Phone Mobile or VMMT offer, you now get that high quality voice service when you are mobile on your smartphone, but with the ability and flexibility to uplift that call into the full Teams experience if you need to collaborate, share video, any of all the things that you can do with full Teams. And then Zeus and Christine, the last thing I think, which really resonates probably with all of us in corporate America, is end user frustration with too many tools, siloed communications. There's just a lot going on, right? And by combining the power of Teams and that full suite offering with being able to eliminate redundant phone services, letting people use their smartphone like they always have, dial like they always have, it's really resonating and driving some simplification, not just in cost, but again, in that end user experience and making their day-to-day lives easier and more productive.
Yeah, a couple of key points I want to make sure that everybody caught there. The first is just the consolidation of tools, right? My research shows that people spend about 40% of their time managing work, right? And I think we do that because of toggle hacks and all that, but we spend an inordinate amount of time being the integration part of the technology. The other one you talked about was the quality you get from network integration. And I think in this world of VoIP, we've gotten so used to over the top, right? I think a lot of people describe it as the good enough experience, but there's certain cases, like when you call a court system, where good enough voice really isn't good enough, right? It's very easy to misunderstand people and things. And so that key difference of network integration versus over the top, I think is one I want to make sure everybody caught and everybody understands, because it does make a marked difference in quality.
Yeah, Zeus, one of my favorite stories from a customer is they literally had members of their team in trenches, right? They were working in trenches and they had no data coverage in those trenches, but using, again, the voice portion of the network,
Yeah.
they had quality voice calling. I never thought I'd hear a customer say that there are actually people in trenches, but that's one of my favorite stories to share.
Yeah, well, I guess for those out there that are trench workers, there's a solution for you. So, yeah, Christine, I'm sure you talked a lot about the employees, and obviously, employee experience is great. But I'm curious, talk about the benefits to your business, but then also that your customers have seen from these solutions.
Well, as I said, one of our drivers was cost savings. So just our small department alone, which is the beta for the branch, there's a lot more departments involved. We're saving $70,000 just from making these few simple migrations that took us 2 months to do. So it's been very powerful from a financial perspective, which our finance people greatly appreciate. It's tax dollar money saved. But in terms of functionality, I've heard a lot of complaints throughout the user base that they don't want to have to carry 2 phones. They don't want to have a work phone and a personal phone and a laptop and a tablet, like you had mentioned. Simplifying. The portability is incredibly important, and reliability on the connectivity, because we have service technicians that are running out for emergency situations to keep court proceedings running, or to have evidence hearings, things of this nature, 7 days a week, as I mentioned. And we also have after hours support. So it's critical that we have reliability, that it's streamlined and easy to use. And my personal favorite is easy to support. We have a very large user base that running ISDN lines on and off people's desks constantly as the judges port from one court to another, this becomes a very large task. So when we have a console that we can manage people's telephony simply through one tool, it's been fantastic in terms of management support and ongoing deployment. When we get onboarding of new employees, we can deploy things very quickly versus having to order lines and phones and wait for dispatch to come out and physically put phones. So all around, it's been very good experience for us thus far.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad we're sharing your story here, because I think, especially in this country, state and local governments are often criticized for not moving fast enough or not innovating, and that causes frustration with citizens and things like that. So the fact that you've gone ahead and modernized the communications aspect of that, like you said, not only has benefits to your employees, but to the citizens at large, right? It's just a much better experience for them as well. So I think, hopefully, other state and other people in the SLED vertical will take your cue from here and do the same thing. So
yeah, I also wanted to add too that it was very important for us. We have a help desk, or a call center, I'll call it, and that number has been around for 25 years. And so to change that number or to port that number and lose possession of that number is a really big deal. My phone number, my landline, nobody knew it, nobody ever used it. So it was critical for us to have the option of direct routing so that number stayed in place, but that we extended it to a mobile environment versus just the landline. So that option was very important for us, so our call desk can service our customers without interruption and having to learn a new number.
I can't even imagine what that process would have been like had you had to bring a new number in there. So yeah. Yeah, you might have been working somewhere else though. So if that Hey, Derek, I'm sure these projects in the deployment of whatever team solution isn't cookie cutter, right? So can you talk about some of the challenges that customers might face, and then some of the best practices and things that they should look for and make sure they do as they adopt these solutions?
Absolutely. And I'm going to come back to what Christine already covered. And this wasn't even planned or by design, but the two things really I think that have been really important as this transition happens is, first of all, what Microsoft licenses are applied to each one of the users. Christine mentioned G5. That is the highest tier license. That's for government. For commercial customers, it's an E5. E5 includes the Teams calling service, but there's also a Teams phone mobile license that's free that has to also be applied to anybody using the mobile feature. So getting those licenses sorted out, whether you have an E3 and need to add Teams phone calling to it, an E5 and need to add Teams, phone, mobile to it is really a critical part of the process. And Christine already talked about exactly, I think the other biggest part of this is identifying which persona each one of your end users has. Are they a mobile user? Are they a fixed user? Do they have any compliance needs, right? And bucketing those end users, like Christine talked about doing, right, in her deployment, just makes everything go so much better. And I said I'd say it again, but it really does allow us all collectively to meet the end user where and how they work. So those are probably the two biggest things that I would take away.
Yeah, the license part of that is always a gotcha. I don't care what IT project you do; it seems to always rear its ugly head, and and whatever. And so, and Microsoft, I know, does have a lot of different options for licensing. So that was a good recommendation. And how about you, Christine? What were some of your takeaways and lessons learned as you went through this migration? And I know you're still going through it, but I'm curious what you've learned up to now.
Well, I would say one of my greatest challenges was it's just I learned it's very important to handhold your users and explain the different product suites. This is a new technology. People are very unfamiliar with it, especially in the government sector. I can't speak for the private enterprise, but in the government sector, they're not familiar with it. So a lot of pre-front, a lot of education and training up front, explaining how the different tools work. And once you do that, the adoption was really quick and easy. But they just need a level of understanding and baselining how they work. Another challenge that we had was with the OU and the Active Directories, making sure that when you organize your Active Directory properly, that your licenses aren't wiped out and you have to reload them again and assign new users. There's some complexity in there, which your system administrator should know how to do. There was a little bit of a learning curve there. We're trying to, document all of those experiences so that as we push out the product further throughout the branch, that it's not so much of an ordeal. But just once they understand the different language and the different usability scenarios, they're very happy with it so far.
Yeah, that's interesting because users, especially in government, don't really like change a whole lot here. So, but with the proper upfront work, you're saying that actually was a pretty smooth migration. Huh?
Right. A lot of upfront work helped benefit, and then having we did a lot of testing. We did testing through remote desktop, through VPN, through on-site iPads, tablets, laptops, personal phones, Android, iPhones. We did all that pre-front work to make sure that we understood what the user experience would be.
Yeah, and some of the migrations I've seen, and in fact, I'll reference the quote, measure twice, cut once, that for every dollar of upfront investment companies make before they do the migration, they usually save themselves $3 to $4 in the back end, right? So, because you're not fixing everything on the fly, and you're not trying to retrain people on the fly, and so it was good to hear you actually echo that. So, and Derek, any final thoughts from you?
I'm just going to once again build on this, right? This is a big change, as Christine acknowledged. Whether you're, going from something you've been using for 20 years, or even if you're finally pivoting into true mobile UC, it's a fundamental change, I think, in how people work. So have a plan, right, for the deployment, like Christine did so well. Do a pilot, make sure you understand everything, and then really build a plan for how you go from that pilot out to a full deployment in a rational way that your end users are comfortable with, that they get the support that they need. Everything that Christine already said, candidly. It's like a model deployment of how to do this. But, don't try to do it necessarily all at once because it is such a foundational change, but have a plan for how you're going to get to the end game.
And what do you think of her using the IT department as the test bed?
I think that makes a lot of sense. And that is why, Zeus and Christine, one thing that's been interesting about this journey this year for me is a lot of different departments sometimes touch this. It starts to cross some traditional boundaries, right? Like, is this a telecom play? Is it an IT play? Or is it something in the mobility department? And those are often three different groups, both in government agencies and commercial customers. So getting some alignment across those groups, I think, through proof of concept, making sure they all understand it and are aligned and supported, I think is really, really important as well.
Yeah. Okay. With that being said, I lied at the last question to you, Christine. I'm curious, did you have to do any kind of realignment of IT? Because I do think in technology, we've lived in these silos for so long, right? This is a data problem, this is a telecom problem, or whatever. But it seems like these things will all come together now. And so, how did you handle that?
Well, our current organization is we have a service desk, a call center, and within that call center, there's a couple of folks that are our telephony people, and they are responsible for all the ISDN lines, the cell phones, the Teams, all of it. And then we have our system administrators who are responsible for all the licensing and the Office products. So we had to align those two groups for a lot of education, front end work. But our biggest obstacle, or not an obstacle, but it was just a challenge, is that we partner with Maricopa County. We are not a part of Maricopa County. We are a partner of. We report into the state of Arizona. So Maricopa owns our network on the network as well as the telephony side. So we work with them on a daily basis in terms of what our need to meet our needs. So we brought those three groups together and we worked as a team from the very get-go, trying to explain our vision, where we wanted to go, and how outlining steps of how we needed each other's help to get there. They had already gone down this venture with a couple of departments, so they were a great help to us. But yes, it definitely takes a team. We are split apart into different groups, but we all have the same end goal: save money, reduce our management support footprint so that we could focus on other things. And then we really needed to make sure we had redundancy and business continuity so that if there are any failures on a network or on a switch somewhere, that we had those in place so that we could continue to service our customers.
That's another great best practice, and to make sure the organizations within your IT department are all aligned with one another. So, yeah. Anyways, that brings us to the end of my questions. It's been a great discussion. We do have a little time for some other questions that have come in, and let me just look through them here. We had one, Derek, you had talked about compliance, right? There's certain verticals where it's important to record calls. Can you record calls with Verizon Mobile for Microsoft Teams?
Yeah, absolutely, Zeus and Christine. You can do that across all three of the flavors that we've discussed here of Teams calling. But the real new news here is that you can do it on the smartphone natively. And to my knowledge, this is the first time in the industry that you've been able to natively record smartphone calls. And when I say natively, I mean, you just pick up your smartphone, you dial away like you would if you were calling grandma, your spouse, anything like that. And that call being anchored back in Teams has that same call recording from a compliance perspective capability extended to it. And it's been a really big deal to some of our customers because they've struggled candidly with how do you do compliance voice recording on a smartphone in a way that can't candidly be bypassed because it's native and network based.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure there is another way to do it natively. You'd have to actually use like a third-party app, right?
Yep, and that's pretty easy to bypass, often by mistake, right? You just go and start dialing your phone like you normally would, and oops, I was supposed to use the app for compliance.
And Derek, I'm going to stick with you with this question as well. You talked about the three different options. What's the thought process that customers might go through to choose one versus the other? And so talk about how those interoperate and the different personas and what they use.
Yeah, the good news is you can mix and match the different calling options within the same customer, just as Christine has done. So 5 users could have a mobile option, 4 could have an operator connect option, and 5 could have a direct routing option. So Microsoft Teams supports that natively. And I think, Zeus, this comes down to two factors, the personas that we already talked about, right? So if you've got really mobile hybrid users, that's pretty easy to put in a bucket of a mobile solution. Then the distinction, I think, really between Operator Connect and Direct Routing, or Verizon VoIP for Microsoft Teams and Verizon Calling, is do you need to integrate other services into the solution? If you do, if it's complex, then direct routing option is probably your best thing. If you want to sort of reduce the complexity, you don't have any other integration needs, you want something that the carrier, like Verizon, is a little bit more responsible, for example, the SBCs, then Operator Connect or Verizon VoIP is the better solution. So that's how I look at it, is mobile versus fixed, and then within fixed, what do you really need to accomplish with those fixed services?
Okay, I think that makes sense. And I think that actually aligns very nicely with what Christine talked to when she described how she went through that process herself. So, and I'm looking at the clock here. I think we have time for one more question. In order to use Verizon Mobile for Microsoft Teams, do you need to use CLEU lines?
It is, and for those that may not know, CLEU is corporate liable, but it does require a corporate liable line. But what I will also say, I love to use myself as an example, that corporate liable line can be on a personal device, on a BYO device. So this is my personal smartphone, and on the secondary SIM, I'm running VMMT, a VMMT number. That's a Verizon corporate number. So it does require a corporate liable service. There's a lot of integration, right, between how Verizon and Microsoft establish their customers logically, but that corporate liable line can be on a BYO device, with a lot of them today supporting that secondary eSIM.
Yeah, well, that actually is interesting because that brings the best of both worlds, right? I think there's companies that wanted to go corporate liable where you had to own the device. And so you've actually broken the lock of the line and the device. So you can have a personally owned device and just the line is corporate liable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's actually I know a lot of companies that moved away from corporate liable because they didn't want to take on device ownership and get into upgrades and things like that. So, anyways, that brings us to the end of the webinar. There's lots and lots of great stuff here. Thank you so much, Christine and Derek, for sharing. Christine, especially for sharing your story, and Derek for going through all the different options. We learned a lot of things, a lot of great best practices. And you heard us talk a lot about how Verizon's calling solutions for Microsoft Teams offers a wide variety of benefits, including a mobile-first experience, easy collaboration, single number simplicity, mobile network quality, which is important because you're not going to get that with over the top, better security and compliance, and all of that wrapped in with reduced costs. So we can actually go out and try and do more with less. And so that's the holy grail for IT, I guess, that we've never been able to achieve before. So, and I think the other important thing is we've explored how these individual solutions can be brought together to meet specific user needs. And Derek and Christine both talked about, I have some fixed users, I have some mobile users. And so thank you again, Christine and Derek, and thanks to our audience. Have a great day. And just any last remarks from either one of you?
I'd just like to thank Christine for being a great partner, and Zeus, you for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Well, on that note, on behalf of Christine and Derek, I'm Zeus Kerravala from ZK Research saying thanks for watching.